Somewhere in this continent, right now, decisions are being made about people who do not know they are being discussed. Their names are being spoken in places they have never been. Agreements are being made about their lives. I know this because it happened to a woman whose story I'm about to tell you. She was chosen before she could walk, offered before she could speak, handed over by the one person on this earth whose entire purpose was to protect her. She was 3 months old. She did not know any of this. For decades, she lived with the consequences and had no name for them. The accident that should have killed her but did not. The illness that came from nowhere and left the same way. The dreams that were not dreams. Then one day, she found out, and everything she thought she knew about her family, her childhood, the parents she had loved and defended her entire life, collapsed. She sent me her story and asked me to share it. This is her story, her words, her survival, her freedom, and I'm going to tell you everything. This is Emefa. That is not her name, but it belongs to a woman of this continent. And she is a woman of this continent. Someone's daughter, someone's neighbor, someone sitting in a church somewhere right now who looks completely ordinary from the outside, as most survivors do. Emefa is in her mid-30s. She has a career. She has a life. From the outside, nothing about her signals what she has been through. The story begins not in her childhood, though that is where the darkness was planted. It begins on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when Emefa was 31 years old. And a woman she has never met said something to her that split her life permanently in two. Before that Tuesday, Emefa had a past she thought she understood. And after that Tuesday, she had a completely different past. The same events, the same memories, but a completely different meaning behind every single one of them. It was a market day. Emefa had gone to buy fabric, an ordinary errand on an ordinary afternoon in an ordinary week of her life. She was 31, employed, independent, a woman who had built something solid for herself, despite a childhood she had always quietly described as difficult. She was at a store examining fabric when an elderly woman she had never seen before stopped beside her. The woman looked at her for a long moment. Then she said something that Emefa initially dismissed as the rambling of a stranger. The woman said, "You are still here. After everything that was done, you are still here. God kept you for a reason, my daughter. But you need to know what was done. You are carrying something that was put on you before you were old enough to refuse it. And until you know what it is, you will never be fully free." Emefa almost walked away. She had learned long ago not to engage with strangers who approach her with spiritual pronouncements. It was not uncommon. She was a woman of faith, and she had heard many things from many people over the years. But something kept her feet on the ground. She asked the woman, "What are you talking about?" What followed was a 20-minute conversation that Emefa described as the most disorienting experience of her adult life. The old woman knew things, not general things, specific things, the kind of things that are not guessable. The woman described a night when Emefa was approximately 2 years old. A gathering that took place in a compound she described accurately. The layout of the building, the number of rooms, the tree that stood in the corner of the yard. She described a ceremony, and she described who had brought Emefa to it. Her father. Emefa almost fell as she could feel the ground move under her feet when the woman said his name. Not because she believed it immediately, but because something deep inside her, something that had been silent her entire life and had no name, recognized it. The old woman told her she had been present at the gathering, that she had been young herself at the time, that she had not understood what she was witnessing until years later, that she had carried the guilt of her silence for 3 decades, and that when she saw MF's face in the market that afternoon, a face she recognized not from memory, but from something she described only as knowing, she could not stay silent any longer. She told MFA, "Your father needed something, power, money, the kind that does not come from work, and someone told him the price, and he paid it with you. He offered your life in exchange for what he wanted. You were not supposed to survive your 7th year, but you did. And everything that has followed, the accidents, the sicknesses, the things that came close and did not take you, has been the consequence of an agreement your father made that you were never told about." The old woman pressed something into MF's hand, a name and a location written on a torn piece of paper, and walked away into the market crowd. MFA stood at that fabric store for a very long time. She did not cry. She felt something she had no word for, like a key turning in a lock that had been sealed for 30 years. She went home that night and did not sleep because she began to remember, and the remembering, every childhood memory now seen through what the old woman had told her, was the most terrifying thing she had ever experienced, because it all fit. Every single piece of it fit. MF's father was a successful man by the time she was born. He had a business, a solid house, a position of respect in the community. By the time MFA arrived, the youngest of 4 children, the family was comfortable in a way that their neighbors were not. She grew up understanding that her father had worked hard for what they had, that he was a self-made man, that his success was the product of discipline and intelligence and God's favor. She loved him. She defended him when her older siblings made vague comments about their father, about the things they had seen or half remembered from years before MFA was old enough to understand. She dismissed them. He was her father. She knew who he was. After the market that Tuesday, she sat in her room and she went back, all the way back. And this is what she found when she looked at her childhood again with new eyes. The first thing she remembered was the visitors. There had always been visitors, men who came late at night and left before morning, men who her mother was never introduced to, men her father met in a room at the back of the house that the children were never allowed to enter. As a child, she had thought nothing of it. Grown men had meetings, fathers had business associates. This was normal. But this was not normal. The second thing she remembered was the way her father looked at her, not with cruelty, not with coldness. That would have been easier to process later. He looked at her with something she had always interpreted as complicated love. A love that seemed to carry weight and regret simultaneously. She had always told herself it was the complexity of a father who did not know how to express emotions. After that Tuesday, she understood it differently. It was the look of a man who had done something irreversible to someone he loved, and who had to live with that person every day, and who could never explain why. The third thing she remembered was what happened when she turned 7. The old woman had said she was not supposed to survive a 7th year, and MFA had always known that Her 7th year was unusual. She had simply never assembled the pieces into the shape they actually made. In the month before her 7th birthday, she fell seriously ill, an illness that the doctors could not diagnose with certainty. She ran fevers that should have been fatal. She was hospitalized twice. Her mother prayed through every night. She recovered completely with no medical explanation that fully satisfied the doctors who treated her. In the week of her 7th birthday, she was involved in a road accident. A vehicle she was traveling in left the road. Every other passenger was injured, including her own mother. But Emefa walked away without a scratch. And exactly 3 months after her 7th birthday, she fell from a height that should have broken her bones. But she stood up and walked. 3 events, 1 year, all of them survivable by no reasonable explanation. She always called it God's protection, and she still believes that. But she now also knows what the protection was protecting her from, because the accident did not stop at 7. They followed her. For the next 2 decades, Emefa's life was marked by a pattern of near misses and unexplained events that she had always treated as separate incidents. They were not separate, they were a trio, and when she finally saw the full trio, she understood she had been in a war her entire life without knowing it. Emefa sat with a notebook that Tuesday night, and she wrote down every significant near-death experience, every serious unexplained illness, every relationship that ended in destruction, every financial breakthrough that was immediately followed by catastrophe. She filled 4 pages, and that was the moment she began to cry. Not because of any single item on the list, but because of the shape of the list. It was not random, it was rhythmic. Every few years, a convergence, a cluster of events that pushed against her life simultaneously, as if something was making multiple attempts in a short period before retreating and waiting again. At age 14, Emefa was at school when a section of the building she was sitting in partially collapsed. She had moved to a different seat 5 minutes earlier for no reason she could explain. The seat she had been occupying was destroyed. 3 years later, she developed a condition that her doctors treated aggressively for 8 months. The condition vanished as suddenly and inexplicably as it appeared. No scar tissue, no lasting damage, as if it had never been. Emefa was in a relationship at age 22 with a man who she discovered had been quietly making inquiries about her background, specifically about her father and his associations. The relationship ended when he disappeared without explanation. She later learned he had been warned away. By whom and how, she never fully established. At age 25, she came the closest she had ever come. A night she does not describe in full detail. She was alone and something entered the room. She survived it through what she will only describe as a voice that told her to speak a specific scripture. She spoke it, whatever came, left. She wrote that night in her notebook simply as, "The night I almost did not make it." A business she had built carefully over 3 years collapsed overnight when she was 28. This was not through her own mismanagement, but through a series of events so specifically targeted at her that 2 independent advisors told her separately, "This does not look like bad luck. This looks deliberate." And then there were the dreams, the same category of dreams since early childhood. She described them not as nightmares. There was no fear in them, no screaming, no chasing. They were transactional. She would find herself in a place she did not recognize, in a conversation with figures she could not see clearly. being told things she could not quite hear. And she would wake up with a specific sensation, the sensation of something being taken, not pain, just absence. Something present before sleep that was gone when she woke. She had told her mother about the dreams as a child. Her mother had prayed over her and told her to ignore them. Her father, the one time she had tried to describe them to him, had left the room. After that Tuesday, she understood why. She had the name and location the old woman had pressed into her hand. She had spent 3 weeks with her notebook, her memories, and her list, and she had made a decision that she described as the most frightening decision of her life. More frightening than any accident, any illness, any night she almost did not make it. She was going to confront her father. She did not call ahead. Calling ahead would have given him time to prepare, to construct, to put back on the face she had always accepted as his real one. She drove for 4 hours. She drove in complete silence and rehearsed nothing, because she had decided she would say exactly what she knew and wait for whatever came back. Her father was at home. He was older now, in his late 60s. The successful man of her childhood had aged into someone quieter, more contained. He had attended church faithfully for the last decade. He was known in his community as a man who had found God late in his life and embraced it completely. She had always found that change in him moving, evidence of grace. Standing at his door that afternoon, she wondered for the first time what exactly he had been trying to outrun. He welcomed her with warmth he always had for her, made tea, asked about her work, sat across from her in the sitting room of the house she had grown up in, and she looked at him for a long moment. Then she said his name. Not Daddy, not Papa, his name. And she said, "I need you to tell me what happened the year before I turned 7. I need you to tell me about the gathering, and I need you to tell me what you offered and to whom." "I already know the answer. I am sitting here giving you the opportunity to tell me yourself." The silence that followed lasted less than 30 seconds. It felt much longer. Her father put down his cap, and he looked at her with that expression she had known her entire life. The complicated love, the weight, the regret. And he said, "Who told you?" Not a question, a statement. She knew in that moment, from those 3 words, that everything the old woman had said was true. What her father confessed in the next 2 hours, sitting in that sitting room in the house built on an agreement made about his youngest child, was more than Emefa had prepared herself for. Because it was not just what he had done, it was why. And the why was a thing she has never fully recovered from. Her father had not always been successful. Before even her older siblings were born, there had been years of genuine desperation, failed businesses, mounting debts, a marriage under severe strain, a man watching everything he attempted collapse before it could stand. He had been approached by someone he trusted, a man from his home area, a man who had known his family for years, and who had watched his struggles with what appeared to be genuine concern. This man told him there was a way, that there were those who could guarantee the kind of prosperity that hard work alone could not produce, that the price was significant, but for a man in his situation, the alternative was a life of continued failure. He resisted for 2 years. Then his youngest child was born, and something about holding Emefa for the first time, something about that specific weight and that specific face, broke the last resistance he had. She was 3 months old when he made the agreement. He could not look at her when he described the terms. He said, The agreement required that she be offered, that her life, not taken immediately, but surrendered in principle, bound across time, would be the currency for what he was asking for. She would leave, he was told, but nothing in her life would be fully hers. Every good thing would come with a cost. Every door that opened would have something waiting on the other side. And at certain intervals, certain years, the claim would be actively asserted. Her 7th year was the first major assertion. She survived it, he told her, and his voice broke when he said this. When you survived the 7th year, I told myself it meant the agreement was void, that God had overruled it. I used that to justify never telling you. I told myself you were free and there was nothing to confess, but you were not free, and I knew you were not free. And I said nothing for 30 years because saying it meant becoming what I actually was. Emefa sat with that for a long time before she spoke again. Then she asked him the question she had driven 4 hours to ask. She said, "Of all the things you could have offered, why me?" He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said something that Emefa included in her message to me with a specific instruction. She wrote, "Include this exactly. This is the part other parents need to hear." He said, "Because you were the youngest, because you would never remember, because I told myself that a life I could protect and provide for was worth more than a life that might have struggled anyway. I made a calculation about my own child, and I have not had one peaceful night since the day I made it." Emefa did not respond to that. There was nothing to say, because some things are so complete in their wrongness that a response would only diminish them. She stayed for another hour. She did not shout. She did not weep in front of him. She asked the remaining practical questions she needed answers: names, dates, the specific nature of what had been done. And she wrote them down in the notebook she had brought. Then she stood up and said to him, "I am going to find my freedom. I want you to know that. Whatever you agreed to, I am going to make it void. Not for you, for me." And she walked out of that house. She drove back 4 hours, and this time she knew what she was going home to do. She had names, she had information, and she had finally, for the first time in 31 years, the complete truth about the war she had been fighting without knowing she was in one. Emefa spent the following 6 months doing 3 things. She found a pastor and a prayer community she trusted, people who had specific experience with exactly what she was carrying. She was careful about who she chose. After everything she has learned, she was done placing blind trust in spiritual authority. She tested, she observed, she watched the fruit before she accepted the hand. She went through a process of deliberate, sustained spiritual warfare that she describes as the hardest thing she has ever done. Harder than discovering the truth, harder than confronting her father, because freedom required her to actively participate in dismantling something that had been built into the foundation of her life. And she forgave her father. Not for him. She is clear about that. She does not use the word reconciliation. She uses the word release. She said, forgiveness was not for him. Forgiveness was me refusing to let what he did keep its hands around my life. Releasing him meant releasing the agreement. I was not going to carry his debt for one more day. She described the moment she knew she was free. Simply, she said, the dreams stopped. The transactional dreams she had experienced since childhood, the sensation of something being taken while she slept, the waking with absence where something had been, they stopped completely. She had not had one since. She ended her message with this paragraph. She wrote, "If you are listening to this and something in it is familiar, not the details, but the shape of it, I want you to hear me. The accidents that keep almost killing you, the illnesses, the dreams, the doors that open and then destroy you. You are not cursed. You are not failing. You are fighting something real. That does not mean you cannot win. I am proof that you can win. Find the right people. Ask the right questions. Do not stop until you have the truth. And when you have it, use it to walk free. Not for anyone else, for yourself." Emefa is free. She's living her life. Working, building, sleeping through the night. And somewhere out there, her father is an old man in a church who found God late and who has to live every day with the knowledge of what he calculated and what it cost a daughter who still chose to release him. I do not tell you that to make you angry at him. I tell you that to make you understand the full weight of what Emefa chose to carry and what she chose to put down. This is not to protect the father, but also not to destroy him. This is to tell the truth and let the truth do its own work. If you are watching this and something in Emefa's story felt familiar, the accidents, the dreams, and the patterns, drop your comment. You can simply drop an emoji. You do not have to explain anything. Just let someone hear you. Share with someone who needs to hear that survivor is not an accident. This is Dangerous African Confessions HD. We shall meet again in our next episode. But before then, you can watch our previous uploads if you haven't already. The link will be in the description.